Good afternoon, everybody. We will start in 1 minute's time. We will be unmuting first all your microphone. We'll be muting all your microphones first. Okay. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. We are going to have our joint lodge meeting today, and we'd like to ask Charlie, the president of the TS in the Philippines, to introduce our speaker for today. Charlie?
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Another pleasant afternoon today, and we are excited to kick off the month of August with a very interesting topic, the homing signal within. And our presenter, who has a degree in nautical science, became a member of the TS way back in 2008. He was a founding member of the PragyaTS Lodge, as well as the Maitri TOS group in Lucknow, India. He has been a speaker both for the Adyar International as well as the Indian section. And he is more interested in the practical application of theosophy, so much so that he has been very active in conducting study camps, seminars, workshops, youth camps for the Indian section. And recently in May of this year, along with his wife Catalina, they launched the YouTube channel named PragyaCSstudio for the propagation of theosophy. His wife Catalina is a teacher in our Adyar Theosophical Academy, and they have a daughter who is among the first enrollees of the ATA about 2 years ago. So this afternoon, we have with us Mr. Shikhar Agnihotri from Adyar. Shikhar, brother.
Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Dear sisters, brothers, and friends from all around the world, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending wherever you are on the globe. And hearty greetings from Adyar. I thank Brother Vicente and Brother Charlie Romero and their team for giving this opportunity and responsibility to share few thoughts during this joint lodge meeting. It is really an honor for me to be among all of our fellow brothers and sisters. As you know, the subject for today's session is the homing signal within. But before we go into the subject of within, let us briefly try to understand what is the homing signal without. What does it signify in our material, objective world? First time I came across this world was about 20 years ago during my professional studies and while working on the ship. And as you may have heard or know, that working on the ships has always been very adventurous but dangerous at the same time. But with years of learning and experience and advancement of technology, the working conditions on the ships have also evolved and made a lot safer for the people on the ship, especially in the case of emergencies. One such improvement or aspect of safety is that there is a small boat provided on the ship, which is called lifeboat, which can be separated from the ship in case of emergencies. like if there is fire on the ship or the ship is about to sink due to the collision with another ship, etc. So in case of emergencies, which is going out of control, people have to leave the ship. So they get in the lifeboat and launch the lifeboat into the water. But what next? How are they going to be rescued? Because with limited amount of resources available to them, they have limited amount of food or water, limited amount of diesel in the boat, and they are in the middle of the ocean. So what are they going to do? What can they possibly do? The only means of rescuing them is that if someone knows about their status and location. And it is for this reason there is an equipment provided in the boat which is called EPIR, which you can see on the screen, which sends the signal to the satellite, and the satellite sends the signal to the rescue center or rescue team. But the limitation with this signal is that it does not give an accurate position of the boat for two reasons. One is that boat is constantly moving with the waves. So it is not fixed at one place. So there is a time lag between the signal. So it does not give an accurate position of the boat. And secondly, due to the high waves, there is an interference in the signals. So instead of giving an exact location, the signal tells the rescue team an area of about 20 square kilometer where the boat can possibly be. But now it is a big area, and how are they going to find the boat in that area? And here comes the use of another equipment that is provided in the boat, which is called SART, as you can see. And this sends a signal to rescue team directly, which we call line of sight, when the rescue team is about 15 to 20 kilometers in range. The difference between the two signals we can understand when somebody trying to contact us, they give us a shout by voice. By voice, we can know from which direction the sound is coming, but we may not know the exact location of that person. But instead of shouting, suppose he flash a flashlight or a torch towards us, give a signal through the light, we will exactly know the location of that person, and following this signal, we can reach to that person. Similarly, following this signal of SART, the rescue team pinpoints the people in distress and homes into the lifeboat, as we call it, and saves them. This signal is called homing signal, the signal that leads one home. In addition to this, an interesting aspect is that if we take a glance over the animal kingdom, we come to know that many species have this ability to trace back their path to their home or point of interest, even if they are shifted by great distance. And some of the best known examples of this powerful homing ability are the birds and the reptiles, especially pigeons, salmon, fish, or sea turtles. Similarly, howling is a vocal homing signal that guides members of the pack home. Or more close to us, the domesticated dogs express a similar call to their loved ones, signaling them to come home. That is what we know about the homing signal in our material objective world. But what is the purpose or reason of sharing this technical thing here in our discussion about inner life? The only reason that seems appropriate to me is to refresh in our minds, because I'm sure all of us at some level of our consciousness are already aware of the fact that whatever we see or have in the outer world, it has its roots or inspirations or prototype in the inner world. And we all must be aware of the fact, the fundamental fact in nature, that whatever is within is without. All our reactions and responses to our environment are the reflections of our inner state of being. Just like on seeing the same object, the reactions may be different of different people. Just like seeing the moon, a poet, a child, or an astronomer would react differently. A poet may find it very romantic and write a poem about it. A child may look at it as a shining toy which he cannot have and cry. And for the astronomer, it is just another globe without any life on it. So the object is the same, but the reaction is different depending upon the inner state of mind or being. Similarly, if we look around carefully, we will find that the working principles behind every materialistic invention is somehow related to or inspired by some hidden or visible process in nature. And a very simple example to share with all of you is the law of septenary, which HPB talks about so frequently in her writings. That is it just a coincidence, or there is a divine order that the number of planes in nature or various states of consciousness, the number of days in a week, the notes in the music, the number of colors in the visible spectrum, the number of principles in man, the number of chakras in the human body, and even the number of layers in the human skin are all 7. And to make it even more scientific, while having the similar discussion in our lodge meeting about the septenary, one of our members brought out, who is related to the field of information and technology, he shared that the open systems interconnection model, the OSI model in the computing world, has also 7 layers, which you can see on the screen: application, presentation, session, transport, network, data link, and physical. Similarly, if we try, we can find many more such examples. And this is the beauty of life and existence, that if we have the eyes, we can see that underlying harmony and order, which is often called divinity by the spiritualists or cosmos by the scientists, working everywhere in this manifestation, irrespective of any superficial difference. But to see that, we need to apply this faculty of ours in daily life, which has the capacity to receive this substratum of consciousness, of divinity everywhere. And then only we will be able to fulfill the first object of the Theosophical Society of universal brotherhood. And so, thinking along these lines, that the outer is the reflection of the inner, it is very natural to have the curiosity that if we have this working principle of homing signal in the outside world, where we save the people in distress by using it, then there must be a similar kind of system or arrangement in our inner life too. And this curiosity naturally gives birth to a couple of questions, which can be that what is this homing signal in our inner life, first of all, if at all. Secondly, if there is something like that within, then how is it related to our daily life? And what is its significance in taking the next step in any aspect of life, be it personal, social, financial, spiritual, any aspect of life? Because first of all, there is no use of studying any philosophy or lofty principles if they cannot be implemented in our daily life. And secondly, as we just discussed, the homing signal is something that takes one home. It enlightens the path, or if not the path, then at least the next step, which is the most important thing to know, because not only the next step determines the direction of our journey, of our travel, but also that is all that we need in the present moment, the next step. And just to have a little bit clear example of it, I hope most of us might have experienced a foggy day, a day full of fog. And maybe on that day, if you remember, sometimes it happens that we can see only a couple of feet or couple of meters ahead of us. What do we do in such a situation? Do we stop walking until the fog is lifted and we wait for the time that once the fog is lifted, then only I will walk? Or do we take the step in our direction of travel? And when we take the step, when we take the first step, the next step, or a couple of steps, what do we realize? We realize that the moment we take one step or a couple of steps, we can see further couple of meters or couple of feet in our direction. And then this becomes a cycle, that the more and more we rely on this inherent push to walk, every step that we take ahead enlightens the next step of our journey. And then this becomes a positive cycle. But if we keep waiting till all the fog is lifted, we may miss some important opportunities in life. So it is only the next step, next one step at a time, that is important, which is indicated by the homing signal. Another question that arises, what is the nature of this signal? And what is the mystery behind it having the solution to all our challenges in life? Because if the philosophy does not offer the solution to our problems or daily struggles, then it is of no use. As the Maha Chauhan says in his letter, to be true, religion and philosophy must offer the solution to every problem. And lastly, the question is that if there is something like that within, how to come in touch with and remain in constant touch with it, so as to have a peaceful and harmonious life. But probably this part we may not be able to cover in this presentation due to the limitation of time and too many things to discuss. But we can have another session if it is needed by anyone and if it is feasible by the organizers. So let us try to find out what is this homing signal within. Due to the sense of separateness and sense of self-importance that we still carry within, very often we think that out of 7 billion people worldwide, I am someone very special, and my achievements, my problems, my character are very special, very different, and more significant as compared to others. But there is no greater fallacy than that. Because having met a lot of people from different cultural backgrounds and countries, we come to realize that the problems of everyone are more or less the same qualitatively. And the human psyche and its workings and reactions are very similar all over the world. And each and every one of us is facing some challenge or a tough situation all the time where we have to make some decisions. What I mean to say is that in this ocean of life, every individual comes across certain situations and circumstances as per karma, where one has to make some tough, challenging decisions, be it a relatively bigger decision of career, choosing a profession, marriage, adherence to principles or compromising with it, relationships, financial, etc., or be it a relatively smaller day-to-day life issue. Example, for what to eat for lunch or which dress to wear for work, etc. Each such situation presents itself to us to make a decision. At every step of our daily life, we are continuously making such decisions, big or small. Normally, these decisions are easily made with the help of the mind, taking into consideration the profit or loss of the decision that we are going to make. Or if the individual has a strong desire nature, then he decides blinded by the desires and not taking into account the consequences, or he decides by being a slave to already acquired habits, which is the case most of the time. But irrespective of all that, many times we are caught up in situations that we are not able to decide with our mind what is the right thing to do. And we feel utterly helpless. Why? Because our mind is a thing of the past. And instead of wisdom, it is full of memories of the past, prejudices or conditionings. But life is ever new. It brings to us every day, or rather every moment, new challenges. And we face them with the mind that is old. And so the mind feels utterly helpless, utterly incapable of a holistic solution. A holistic solution being the one which is taken wholeheartedly without any regrets and which is in welfare for everyone, because it has its roots in the understanding of the unity of life. And it is in such a situation of indecision or dilemma that we often turn to someone whom we think has more wisdom than we do, either to a guru, to some book, to an astrologer, or sometimes we even try to escape the situation by keeping ourselves busy in some sort of entertainment or eating or shopping, etc. Normally, we don't want such a situation in our life where we have to take such tough decisions, because it brings the mind under a lot of stress, because the mind wants security and wants to live in its comfort zone, and any situation that destabilizes this comfort zone is not at all welcomed by the mind. But in fact, this exactly is that valuable moment that if we remained silent, not escaping it, not fighting it, not indulging in it blindly, just facing and seeing the situation as it is, something happens. The question is, what happens? Maybe immediately or not, but definitely we realize that some sort of clarity has arrived in our thought process, in our thinking process, if not a clear solution or an answer from within. But the nature of this answer or solution from within and the way that it comes to our mind may vary from person to person and from situation to situation. But talking about the different ways first, out of which few may have been experienced by many of us at some point of time in life, I'm sure. Let us try to understand them with some examples, but at the same time, it is important to remember that we are only discussing the possibilities of it here. First of all, it can be in the form of a dream. And for an example, we turn to someone about whom we must have studied in our school or college. We know him by the name of Dmitri Mendeleev, the discoverer of the periodic table. We all know that he discovered the periodic table, but what some of us may not know, how it happened. Dmitri Mendeleev was contemplating hard to find a logical way to organize the chemical elements. He had been thinking about it for months. So one day what he did, he took many cards, small pieces of cards, and he wrote the name of the element on each card, one card for each element. And on the same card, he also wrote the properties of those chemical elements. By doing this, he saw that atomic weight of the element is important in some way, but he could not still find a pattern in them. Convinced that he was about to find something significant, he kept moving the cards here and there, trying to arrange in different ways. He could not, he felt tired, and he fell asleep on his desk. But when he woke up, he found that a logical arrangement of elements had come to him in a dream. And he later wrote, "In a dream, I saw a table where all the elements fell into place as required. And on waking up, I immediately wrote it down on a piece of paper." And thus, we got the document that we know as periodic table. Another way that this signal can affect us in our waking consciousness is it can be in the form of a vision. And for an example, we take Sri Aurobindo. Many of us may be knowing him, that he was an Indian philosopher, yogi, and a nationalist. He joined the Indian movement for independence, but during his struggle for independence, he was caught and put in a solitary confinement in the jail, but was released later because the evidence could not be provided against him. But what is more important is that during his stay in jail, he had mystical and spiritual experiences. The most significant was the vision of Vasudeva, or Lord Krishna, or Krishna consciousness, we can say, or Christos consciousness in every being and in everything in the prison cell of the jail. The central theme of his vision was the evolution of human life into a divine life. And it changed his life completely. And he left politics for spiritual work, which is for all of us to see right now what legacy he has left behind him. Another way that this signal can affect us in our waking consciousness is that it can be in the form of a sudden understanding of an idea. And when I say sudden, I am sure most of us might agree. And if I say that it is also has to be related to some scientific discovery, most of us might know that we are talking about Archimedes, because Archimedes was given the task to determine whether the crown of the king was made of pure gold, or the goldsmith has replaced some gold with some other metal. And because the crown was a holy object dedicated to the gods, he could not disturb the crown in any way. Just like in modern terms, we can say that he was not allowed to do the destructive testing, in which the object also is destroyed, but you get the test results. So Archimedes kept thinking long and hard, but he could not find a method for doing this, for proving whether the crown has some impurity or not. And in this state of contemplation, when he entered the bathtub, he noticed that the water spilled out over the edges of the bathtub as he got in, and he realized that the water displaced by his body was equal to the weight of the body. And this suddenly gave a flash of the idea in his mind that by using this method, he could determine whether the crown was of pure gold or not. And himself, amazed with this solution, He got so excited that forgetting that he was undressed, he went running naked down the streets from his home to the king, shouting, Eureka, Eureka, as I think we all must have studied at some point of time in our life. Another way that the signal can be very significant in someone's life is that it can be in the form of an inner voice, giving a small hint or a subtle thought or a direction to work upon. And for the example, I would like to share with all of us, members of Theosophical Society or otherwise, to whom she was and is and will be a very prominent figure of all times. We all know that Dr. Annie Besant was called an Iron Lady or a diamond soul for her contribution in the direction of upliftment of human consciousness. But earlier in her life, even she came across such hardships to such an extent that at one point of time she decided to end her life. She had a bottle of poison in her hand, and as she was about to drink it, she heard a clear voice of stern disapproval which said to her, "O coward, coward, who used to dream of martyrdom and cannot stand a few years of woe." Unquote. She instantly threw the bottle out of the window and never forgot that voice. It is said that it was her master's voice, but who are the masters except this inner principle which is common to all existence? As HPB writes in her collected writings, that the light of the higher self and of the Mahatma are not different from each other. Now we come to the last example of this way, how the signal reaches it. And this is even more interesting, that in some cases, the signal can even be from without, which sounds strange that we are talking about the homing signal from within. How can it come from without? Actually, it is the sign that comes from outside, but the understanding that comes from within. And this sign that we often call as a sign from the nature may be totally unrelated to our situation, but at the same time, totally applicable to our inner life. And I'm sure many of the times, most of us must have gone through this experience that you are traveling or sitting, looking in the sky or at some event with some thinking, brooding going on in the mind related to some problem, and suddenly you see something totally unrelated to yourself, but whatever is written there or some image that links that outward signal with the inner problem and gives a solution to our thinking in a concrete form. And it is in this context I would like to share an event from Siddhartha Gautama's life, that for 6 years, Siddhartha and his 5 followers lived in silence and never left the forest. They drank rainwater and had grains of rice or the dropping of bird as food, trying to master the physical suffering by making the mind stronger. One day during this course of time, Siddhartha was sitting in meditation, and behind him there was a river flowing, and in that river the boat was passing by, and on that boat there was a musician who was teaching his son come disciple about a musical instrument called veena or lute. And what he said was that the string of the lute should neither be too slack nor too tight. It should be just right. Because if it is too slack, it will not play. And if it is too tight, it will break. So the tension in the wire of that lute has to be just right. Although this conversation has no relation to Siddhartha Gautama's state of mind, but this inner faculty connects the two. And with Siddhartha suddenly realized that those simple words held great truth. And in all these years, he had been on the wrong path of extremes. With this new insight, he rose up, revived himself with a meal brought by a village girl by the name of Sujata, and sat refreshed under the Bodhi tree to meditate with a new resolve. And thus the Buddha was born. And as a result, we see that the Noble Eightfold Path, which is also called the Middle Path, is given by Gautama Buddha. So these are some of the possible ways that I could think of. There may be some more, which I think it's everybody's field of research that we can dwell on that more and more. Now, coming to the nature of this signal from within, mostly it has two attributes. Firstly, one can observe that very often this solution that comes is quite revolutionary or contradictory to the set pattern of the mind. And as long as the person is in that meditative state of being, it seems so simple and practical that it is impossible to doubt it. But the moment that state of communion passes away and we come out of our silence, the prejudices and conditionings of the lower mind cloud our thinking again and creates a lot of imaginary obstacles in carrying out this solution, because the mind always wants to work with already established framework that it has created because it feels comfortable, secure in it. Be this framework of religion, castes, creed, social norms, etc. And to do the out of the box thinking or to see the bigger picture, one has to have an open mind, clear from the prejudices. But since mostly this is not the case and our lower nature is so strong that so many creative and good suggestions or ideas from within each one of us are suppressed by self-doubt or fear of society, what people will say. We have an amazing idea or solution to something, but many of the times people are so much affected by the public opinion that they hesitate to share that brilliant idea or to implement that brilliant idea, or due to fear of failure. And all these brilliant creative suggestions or ideas remain at the level of thought only and rarely get implemented. But there are exceptions too to this, because with this answer comes the conviction and courage too. The conviction that what I am doing is right, and the courage to stand alone, even if the whole world stood against me, which is a very familiar quality of most of the leaders or many of the leaders who are called madmen in the beginning, only to be named as visionaries sometime later when their vision starts manifesting itself. But this conviction is totally different from the stubbornness of a rigid mind, which is born out of selfish motive of self-profit. So those who are not able to overcome their lower nature, they gradually lose their access to this signal. And those who are able to overcome their lower nature and follow this inner call gets more and more in sync with it, because they create a positive cycle. As we just discussed before, every step we take gives us more faith and trust in our inner calling, and the more and more we get such kinds of calling. And this is that homing signal from our spiritual ego that guides us to take the next step by taking into account the bigger picture, which throws the light on the path, or which is the voice of the silence, or so many other names that can be given or already given to this inherent faculty in all human beings, which is intuition, or prajna, or direct perception, or wisdom, or insight. And as we just discussed, that it is not just for spiritual life, but also the worldly life that it holds all the solutions. Because in reality, there is no distinction between spiritual and material. There is only one life which has various aspects, which we call physical, which we call as personal, social, spiritual, material, financial, or some other aspects. It is only the approach of the individual that counts, and that is whether it is material or spiritual. But at the same time, it is important to mention that this is not the hunch or the gut feeling or the sixth sense as normally misunderstood, which could be due to the extra sensory powers, which belongs to our lower self, which is our physical body or brain, astral, which is desire and emotions, and our lower mind. And it may have some survival values, like some people can sense the danger that is coming and can take precautionary measures. It is a faculty actually that we share with the animal kingdom, which is called instinct. It is also not precognition, which is a form of clairvoyance, which is lower than intuition, as HPB calls it, and she gives it a name of spiritual instinct or divine instinct. In theosophical literature, intuition is the faculty which is found in Buddhic consciousness, the sixth principle about which the Mahatma says that fathom the nature and essence of the sixth principle of the universe and man, and you will have fathomed the greatest mystery in this our world. And why not? Are you not surrounded by it? Unquote. It is the Anandamaya Kosha as per Vedanta, which means it is beyond mind. And this is the difference between the working of the mind and of intuition. And this may be also the reason that it is sometimes difficult for a student of Western psychology, or basically Freudian psychology, to understand intuition, because for him, mind is the only tool for understanding in a human being. But if we see carefully, mind works based on the sensation collected by various senses and organizing the images formed on the basis of such sensations. For example, I have an orange in my hand. I see it and an image is formed visually. I touch it, an image is formed by the touch. I smell it, an image is formed. I taste it, and another image is formed. And all these images are organized by the mind to give me one full image of an orange. That's how the mind works. But the intuition is the direct perception. By being one with the object, it is a faculty that perceives immediately the underlying relationships between forms or unity in diversity. For example, let's try to have a very rough example, not a very good example, but Suppose I am given the task to make a layout of the room. What all things are there in a room, I am told to make a layout of it. And by chance, when I entered the room, it is completely dark. There is no electricity, no light. I do not have my mobile phone with me, so I can switch the torch on. I don't have with me any candles, and it is urgent. What will I do? I will start moving around the room, vaguely touching the things and making an image in my mind, and then organizing all those images in the mind to have a layout of the room. But all of you can already imagine what kind of layout will that be. Instead, what happens, the power comes back on, and I reach out to the switchboard and I switch on the light. And what happens? Just in a flash, in a fraction of a second, the whole layout of the room is impressed on me. And we can call it the illumination that is brought by intuition. And that is why many times we hear the statement that follow your heart or think from your heart, because we study in theosophical literature that heart is the spiritual center in the body, besides the other two centers, the intellectual center and the karmic center in the navel. But again, there is a word of caution too, because such is not always the case, because many times what we think to be our intuition turns out to be yet another form of our desires or conditionings or prejudices impersonating as intuition, because the mind is very clever. But if one is aware of one's own thought process, it can easily see how our likes and dislikes affect the smallest of our actions, and whether it is intuition or is it just another trick of mind. Just to have an example, suppose you are being called to be the interviewee in a company to interview a couple of people to find one person for a job. And during the course of interviewing them, you find most of them are having good qualifications, skills, personal behavior, and all of them are like at a very similar level. But during the course of interview, you found out that one of this person is somehow related to you, either by a family relationship, or maybe he went to the same school, same college, he speaks the same different languages, or he lives in the same place that you live, or maybe your habits or interests match. Now, what happens in the back of the mind, that with all these similarities, the mind is already getting impressed by this relation and tending to have this notion that this person may be a better person out of all the others. And to support that thinking, we think that it is our inner call. Oh no, all of them are good, but I think my heart tells that this person is better. Who will decide? Only me, only myself. If I am aware of my thought process, what is going on at that moment, why am I inclined to take this person, or why am I making friendship with this person? What is the hidden motive? I am the only one who can decide for myself whether it is the true intuition or it is another impulse. But still, the question still remains how to differentiate between the two. Of course, there is no such scale or benchmark or a black and white line to distinguish. And each and every person is a complex and a unique individual. So each one of us has to find out for oneself by trial and error. But there are few possible indications or pointers, although they may not be applicable all the time, but which can still be applied to see if what we have is intuition or it is the impulse of desire or whim. As you can see on the screen, the first one is the delay. That delay in implementation of that inner calling. As Annie Besant says, that calm consideration is necessary and delay is essential. Why? Because an impulse dies away under such consideration and delay. And intuition grows clearer and stronger under such conditions, because calmness enables the lower mind to hear it or to receive it even more strongly. Impulse gets weaker with time, but intuition grows stronger. I think many of the times we might have, if we remember the childhood, that if I want an ice cream or some delicious food to eat, the impulse to have it is very strong. But if we do not receive it and our attention is gone somewhere else, that impulse is totally gone, maybe never to come up again for another few days or weeks or months. Another pointer is conviction or stubbornness, because with intuition, as we discussed, comes conviction and courage, but along with an open mind, which is ready to receive advice and instructions if it improves it, while the impulse is stubborn and in its blind pursuit of self-gratification, it does not hesitate even in harming anybody else who comes in the way of fulfilling it. Another pointer may be the patience or frustration, because intuition does not get frustrated or discouraged even when there is a failure or long waiting period, as we just discussed. But there is irritation and frustration when impulse is not fulfilled or it meets failure. And last, whether it is holistic or selfish, if it is intuition, it will lead to the greater good of everyone. But if it is selfish impulse, it can only think of its own personal benefit. These are few possible indications, but there may be more. But basically, one has to study oneself to find out the truth for oneself, which is actually studying the book of life, and which is meditation too, about which we will discuss in another session if possible. But all of this discussion would be incomplete if we do not dwell a little deeper into the nature of this faculty that is intuition, and why it is the high time that we took it more sincerely, if not seriously, and why is it that it seems to have the solution for all our problems? Because it is not the word intuition that is important, but the understanding of the word that we have. And for this purpose, we are going to use a couple of statements or quotes to understand them in a better way. In the words of Yogi Sri Krishna Prem, Buddhi is the intuition which grasps all connections and grants us the vision of the wholeness. The Buddhi then is the vision which sees the pattern of the whole, and which therefore, being able to take account of the whole, is preeminently the charioteer of the psyche. When the chariot is driven according to the dictates of Buddhi, no harm can ever come to it, for it will be driven in the spirit of cosmic harmony, in which there are and can be no mishap. This statement has many aspects to it, just to have a couple. First, being the vision of wholeness that intuition grasps, which actually implies the witness consciousness or choiceless awareness. Because until and unless we act as an impartial witness to a scenario or situation, we are a party to it. And as long as we are indulging in a situation at a personal psychological level, we can never have the integrated vision, but only the fragments of the whole picture. And the integrated vision we can only have when we are there as an impartial witness taking account of the whole. And maybe that is why HPB says that it is the only faculty by means of which men and things are seen in their true colors. And it is our duty to keep alive in man his spiritual intuitions. This is a very interesting statement from HPB, and when dwelt upon, it gives a rather interesting insights in our interaction with others, because we rarely meet with others. I'm not saying that we do not come in touch with others, but we rarely meet the person that we are going to meet. And the logic behind is that, have we ever questioned or have we ever thought how many people are there when two persons meet? Although there is a quote relating to this by Mr. William James, but leaving the quote aside, just thinking logically, there are 6 entities present when the two persons meet. Who are they? The image of the other person that I have in my mind, my image that the other person has in his mind, the image that I have about myself in my mind, the image that the other person has about himself in his mind, the person who I really am, and the person who the other entity really is. The 6 entities. And that is the reason that we rarely meet someone at a deeper level. But once the prejudices and conditionings of the mind are transcended, as HPB says, the perception by intuition comes into play. And it is not mere communication between the two, but a communion without any pretensions or barriers of the mind. And then we can see the things or men or other people as they are. Adding another dimension to this explanation, Master KH says to Epicenet that it was never the intention of the occultist really to conceal what they had been writing from the earnest students, but rather lock up the information for safety's sake in a secure box, the key to which is intuition. Very often, we find that most of the spiritual literature is clouded with symbolisms or allegories or metaphysics, and not able to understand the real meaning of the words, whether it is Puranas of the Hindu, or the Bible of the Christians, or the Quran of the Muslims. Without understanding the allegorical meaning and going by the literal meaning, we see that so many superstitions, inhuman customs, and bigotry has crept in religion. And the largest bloodshed till date in the history of mankind has happened in the name of religion, which in itself is a paradox, because religion is supposed to bind everyone together with the thread of love and brotherhood. But going by the mind does not look feasible. But the same scriptures, when contemplated upon and read in the light of intuition, everything falls in its proper place, giving us a view of the full picture to the student about his own religion, the teachings of his own religion, as a consequence of which a Hindu becomes a better Hindu, a Christian becomes a better Christian, or a Muslim becomes a better Christian. Basically, everyone becomes a better human being. And at the same time, those mysteries are kept safe and secured from the hands of those who are not yet ready to receive them. And last but not the least, Adi Shankaracharya in Vivek Chunamani, or the book that is known as Crest Jewel of Wisdom, explains in a very simple way when he says that intuition is prajna. Intuition or prajna is that faculty that enables us to realize unity of individual self to universal self. That is a state of non-duality, and it is in that state of being nothing else but divine will shall manifest. It is the same state of which J. Krishnamurti talks about when he says the observer becomes the observed and there is no duality. And this is exactly the reason that it has the solution for all our problems, because the one source of evil or problems is the duality or the sense of separateness. And the separateness is created by the mind, so the solution must be at a higher level than the mind. As Einstein says, that we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. And the moment that we get closer and closer to Buddhic consciousness, we get closer and closer to sense of unity, of universality. And the mind-made barriers begin to fall. And the vision begins to clear. The love begins to blossom. And the compassion begins to flow. And although the challenges still be there, but now we know what to do and why. And this brings a joy and happiness in itself, knowing what to do and why. And as Master KH says, that happy is he whose spiritual perceptions ever speak, ever whisper truth to him. And probably from this wisdom only, coming down to a much day-to-day language, this idiom might have taken birth to put oneself in someone else's shoes. Basically, to imagine oneself in the situation or circumstances of another person so as to understand or empathize with their perspective, opinion, or point of view. And this faculty is within all of us, as Light on the Path says, that within you is the light of the world, the only light that can be shed upon the path. If you are unable to perceive it within you, it is useless to look for it elsewhere. By studying all the above statements, one can very clearly observe that this is the faculty that is going to have the most significant role in the functioning of the next generation evolution, which is termed as the sixth subrace of the fifth root race or the sixth root race of humanity, and the first and third objective of Theosophical Society points in this direction, which is universal brotherhood based on the realization of non-duality, and not merely being virtual or intellectual in nature, and the powers of love, wisdom, and compassion which are latent in the human being. But this leaves us with an even more important question, which is how to perceive that light or the homing signal. The home in this case being the universal self, whence everything comes and whithers everything goes at the time of dissolution. But due to the limitation of time at present, we may discuss it at some other time if needed, because we cannot share it in a very brief time. And once again, I thank the organizers, Brother Vicente, Brother Charlie Romero, and the whole team to give me this opportunity to share some of the thoughts upon this subject. And I thank all the participants for their patient hearing and taking time out to attend this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shikhar. That is a very profound subject matter. Now we will open our session to a questions and answers. If you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself or you can post it in the chat box. And then we will just convey it to Shikhar. Those among you who are listening in Facebook, you can also post your question, and then it will be conveyed to us. Okay. So there are a few comments here. Shikhar, appreciating your presentation, very clear and pointing the way.
Okay, thank you. And I think maybe, I don't know if there are no questions, you yourself can share some of your deep thoughts if you want.
Well, let the listeners, the participants, maybe clarify things that you have brought up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, Shikhar, whether you have looked into many of the studies made on intuition.
Yes, yes, yes,
okay.
yes.
Maybe you'd like to share some of those studies briefly.
Yes, actually, I would like, yes, I can share regarding that. And okay, here is something that I also realized, or kind of got a clarity in my thinking, which is regarding to conscience and intuition. Because in a more common day-to-day language, many people use this term conscience as our inner guide in the life, which is true to some extent. But is that same as intuition or not? So I would like to have more light on this. I would like to share a quote by Mahatma, Letters to AP Synod, where he was explaining about conscience and intuition, and I got myself also very much clarity, because many times the conscience is thought to be the inner guide. What he says about conscience, that with all the formidable importance of this moral factor, it has one radical defect. Conscience, as it was already remarked, may be well compared to that daimon whose dictates were zealously listened to and so promptly obeyed by Socrates. Like that daimon, conscience may perchance tell us what we must not do, yet it never guides us as to what we ought to perform, nor gives any definite object to our activity. I think this statement in itself gives us a very clear idea that the difference between conscience and intuition. And the same thing, if we read the book Karma by Annie Besant, we can see there she very clearly explains that conscience is actually the voice of our higher ego, yes, but it also develops. How? She, while explaining how the law of karma works, she explains that they see a definite principles of karmic law working with the mental images, like our aspirations and desires become our capacities, our repeated thoughts become our tendencies, our will to perform becomes our actions, and our experiences becomes wisdom, and our painful experiences becomes conscience. So it means whatever painful experiences, like whatever we did in the past, be it this birth or in the previous birth, we did something wrong as per our moral structure, and we had to undergo some painful experiences. So that impression is very deep hidden, impressed in our causal body. And so then next time the similar situation happens, that inner voice of conscience tell us not to do it. So there Annie Besant says that so long as actions are in question which have been done over and over again, of which the consequences are familiar either to the reason or to the thinker himself, the conscience speaks quickly and firmly. But when unfamiliar problems arise, as to the working out of which experience is silent, conscience cannot speak with certainty. So that is a kind of difference that we can think in conscience and intuition. And at the same time, I would like to share one last thing on this. What HPB says, that intuition can be thought of along the same lines as reminiscence, because what she says in Key to Theosophy, that reminiscence is an entirely different thing. She says that reminiscence, it is no faculty or attribute of the physical memory, but an intuitional perception apart from an outside physical brain. A perception which, covering as it does all those visions in man or human being which are regarded as abnormal from the viewpoint of the Western psychology. Because in Western psychology, there are the terms defined remembrance or recollection, but reminiscence is not defined even there. Because remembrance and recollection are still the faculty of memory. The memory has this faculty of remembrance and recollection. When something recurs in our mind, some idea, some image, without any external object, we call it remembrance. And when we try to remember something with a lot of effort and pain, then it is called recollection. So those are some of the things which I thought, everybody can read along those lines more, and do more research on that subject to have in-depth personal understanding of this subject, I think.
There is a question here, Shikhar.
Yeah.
If we only see things in a small picture, what are the ways that we can see more in a bigger picture? Marlene.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
In other words, my understanding is that if a person sees only the small picture,
yeah,
how can she see the bigger picture in life?
Okay, the question of how we are going to discuss separately as we discussed, but yes, the benefit is definite. If he is asking how, I think during the course of presentation we discussed, there were some hints which gives us light that what all things we can do to have this bigger picture. And I think theosophic way of life, which includes study, meditation, selfless service. And apart from that, there are some more things that we can discuss at some other point of time if we follow them. But since each of these things, study, meditation, and selfless service, we need to go in detail how it helps us in getting the bigger picture. That is, we can discuss later. But as of now, the benefit I can share, for example, very practical level. Suppose I have a child at home and I want to give all the comfort to my child. So as I understand, for me, this is a smaller picture, because I am only concerned about giving the comfort to the child. So I will use all the comfortable things, give him the most comfortable bedroom, air conditioning, or any other luxury that I can afford, I will give. And I would not even let him walk. Maybe I will always be carrying him in my lap so as he does not have to fall. That is my view of good upbringing. But as many of us may agree that this is actually a smaller picture, because if I am doing that to my child, I am actually not helping him at all. I am making him dependent and not helping him grow. Where when he is able to walk, his muscles of the leg will grow. When he is in certain environment where there are no comforts, no luxury, how is he going to survive? So if I have that picture, if I have that bigger picture in my mind, my actions in the present, and thus that bigger picture will change my actions. But still, just since uh, he asked a question, I would like to quote HPB in this, that how, I mean, just in a one line, what HPB has said about this. And the student asked HPB, and it is printed in the magazine called The Path, that tell me some ways by which intuition is to be developed. So HPB writes, first of all, by giving it exercise, and second, by not using it for purely personal ends. I think this statement in itself speaks a lot. And further, she says that exercise means that it must be followed through mistakes and bruises until from sincere attempts at use it comes to its own strength. So it does not mean that suddenly we become all enlightened, we'll become all enlightened and we'll know everything, what to do, when to do, how to do. But by this exercise, by this trial and error, if we keep doing as recommended in the Theosophic Life, she says that we can make this intuition, the inner, the homing signal within, stronger and stronger every time. And also inevitably in this, at first we will make errors, but soon if we are sincere, it will grow brighter and we'll make no mistake. And one more thing she recommends to do is we should add the study of the works of those who in the past have trodden this path and found out what is the real and what is not. So I hope I was able to express myself as in line with the question. Yeah.
There's another question here, Shikhar.
Yeah.
Does it mean that we need to deepen our buddhi consciousness to improve our intuition?
Yes, exactly. As we discussed that intuition is found in our buddhic consciousness. And buddhic consciousness, the nature in the last slide that we studied, is the nature that it tends to see the underlying unity. That although, suppose just the difference is, if I am seeing this much, I am seeing 4 different fingers. But if I go deeper, I am seeing that it is actually coming from the same root. So basically, the forms are different, which is when we look from the mind. But as the questioner rightly says, if we go deeper and deeper, and actually we don't have to do anything about the Buddhic consciousness because it is already there. The only thing we have to do is to remove the obstacles that are there in buddhi enlightening our mind. And all the spiritual disciplines, if we see, tell us to work upon our personality, our physical body, our astral being, desires, and our thoughts. because buddhi, we don't have to do, it is always there as a universal principle, but its light is not able to enlighten our brain because of all these conditionings. Conditioning is like we get wrapped up in a blanket, and the light, it's like I am in a room with full of windows, but the windows and doors are closed, the sun is outside, so I cannot do anything with the sun. The only thing I can do is to open my window, and once the window is open, the more windows are open, the doors are open, there will be light, as well as there will be the good circulation of the air, and the whole perception of this world will change. Yeah, I think that's totally correct.
You are focusing on intuition. Shikar,
Yes, yes.
your intuition, the definition of intuition as far as common language is concerned is hunch, to have a hunch, an
Yes.
inner knowledge. But your explanation of intuition is more metaphysical, isn't it?
Yes, totally. That is 100% right. Totally, Sullivan. Because yeah, here what we are studying intuition as per what theosophical literature is and what the philosophy says. But you are right. In many day-to-day language, even a hunch or a gut feeling or some sort of clairvoyance is also termed as intuition, which actually I referred to the Theosophical Encyclopedia, a very good book, very nice collection, of which Brother Vicente is also a contributor. We can read in that these are more like the lower qualities of our psychic nature. Some sort of intuition, some sort of clairvoyance or instinct, even sensing the danger. That what we call hunch is like we sense some danger that is in close proximity, and we get that feeling, and we take a precautionary measure. But this feeling is more like an instinct. So from instinct to intellect to intuition, we can have like three. Instinct is more of like our psychic nature, intellect is more of our mind, and when the mind is illuminated by our buddhi, it is called buddhi manas or manas tejasi, as we study in the, or it is called spiritual ego. Otherwise it is just higher mind or higher ego, but when it combines with the buddhi, then it is called spiritual ego also. So yes, many a times we see that the definitions in general are different, or common day-to-day language what we use, but that is why also I discussed about conscience and reminiscence, that what relation they have with intuition.
Your homing signal in the topic is that is intuition the homing signal?
Signal, yes, yes, yes. I intended to convey that only, that the homing signal within is, homing means the thing that leads us home. And as we study then that as a monad, when we are going through this obligatory pilgrimage, the whole cycle, a whole journey that we are taking, including multiple rebirths and reincarnations, our home is basically to be in that one with that essence, to be from where everyone came out at the beginning of the manifestation, and where we have to reach. And buddhi, that is intuition, is a faculty, as the last slide I show of Adi Shankaracharya, he says that it is a faculty that enables us to realize this unity between individual self and the universal self. That is right. So our home is actually the universal self, and towards it, it is leading us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Shikhar Bhaiya, for nice representation on signal with examples.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
There is a comment here by C.C. Slav. He's saying that intuition is when a light comes, we can always consider it intellectually afterwards. That is the difference in instinct, which is impulsive in the lower nature. Instincts change quickly and are rarely durable if not illuminated by buddhi. In my opinion, we often get the signal from the inside. The question is only if we want to listen to it. I think it is the homesickness of the soul, the call of our higher nature to return home, our inner core and homing signal.
Thank you. I think very clearly explained and expressed. Yes, yes, and that is yes. I think whenever I think whoever starts walking this path or goes into this direction of introspection, sometimes or in some moments, I think we all feel homesick, not in a way of like what we talk as homesick. In the same way, the feeling is that this whole world seems like an alien place and we have to go somewhere else.
There's a question, Shikar. Is it possible that when intuition illumines, it triggers the memories of our lower mind?
When intuition
illumines,
yeah.
Does it trigger the memories of our lower mind?
Okay. Okay, I do not have any personal experience or technical speciality to say this, but what I can say with logic is intuition, as we just discussed, is the faculty that brings us in harmony with nature, and it illumines our mind for something, for for any decision we have to make or for any problem that we are contemplating upon, and the solution that comes is holistic. And of course, it actually, the memories, what I would say, the memories lie in our causal body. The lower nature of our the lower nature personality, when illuminated by buddhi, will have actually the positive effect, because as we discussed in the presentation, for that time being, when we are free from any conditionings or prejudices, for that time being, our lower mind is at peace, and then only the light of intuition enlightens it, illumines it. So it means we get a positive direction. But again, the moment we come out of that moment of communion, the conditionings of prejudices again cloud our thinking. But I don't see any reason that why the illumination by intuition will trigger our memories of the lower mind.
Hi, sorry, I'm Keith. I'm the one who asked the question.
Okay.
So meaning that when the intuition illumines, there's no forms to it? Because when we have memories of the lower mind, there are forms.
Yes, yeah, that's what, when memories of the lower mind are forms, but even in the mental plane, we see that the level above the lower mind, we have the abstract mind or the higher mind, where the things are more in the form of ideas or principles. So that's why it is called arupa manas, or without forms. But and even higher when we go, buddhi, it is even subtler plane. But since it has to act through the mind, because it cannot act without the tool, without the medium that we have. The vibrations come from intuition to the mind. From the mind it comes to our brain, and then only we are able to act. So first of all, our brain has to be able to receive those signals. And since our brain, our astral body and our lower mental body is new in every birth, so actually the real memory lies at the level of higher mental. Our memories of the past lives are actually in our causal bodies. Once it is illumined, possible that due to that, when we are able to see a bigger picture, there is a possibility that we can have even a glimpse or a flash of some of our past lives or some instances.
All right, thank you.
All right. Now we are running out of time. And just one more question here given by Trish. How will you know if it's real vision and not just an imagination?
Yes, I think that is a very practical question, and that I think, as we discussed, there is no benchmark or a clear black and white thing where we can set out a rule that it is like that. And each and every person is unique and a complex individual, so it is for each and every person to decide. But still, some of the things that comes to my mind right now, if it is a vision that is created by self-hypnosis, or what we call sometimes auto-suggestion, or we continuously thinking, or we want a certain kind of experience, our mind creates that vision. And that is the reason many times a Christian will have a vision of Jesus. A Hindu will have a vision of any of the Hindu gods. Why? Because all these prejudice, the conditioning of the mind is such that we see things in a particular way. So we have the visions in that forms. But it doesn't matter what vision is that. What I personally think, if it is really a vision of that level, what we discussed of Sri Aurobindo, and not one which is created by the trick of the mind, what effect, what change does it bring in my daily life? If I say I have a vision of divinity everywhere, okay, that's good. But does that change my behavior to the persons I am meeting throughout the day? Does it change my attitude towards animals, plants all around? Do I still make the difference that if somebody important person is there, I am meeting with a lot more respect? But if I'm meeting with my subordinates or some other person who is not so important to me, so am I like ignoring that person? So for me, any vision or any experience, the ultimate test is how much change towards universality does it bring in my daily life. Because it is no use having some transcendental experiences or visions in sitting meditation, and after getting up from the meditation, we go back to our original way of living and same conditioning and prejudices. So for me, that is the only test.
Okay, thank you, Shikhar. I think Taral Munshi has just one last question to ask. Would you like to ask it now, Taral?
Yeah, Shikhar, how are you? Very nice explanation. What goes to me, I think I have a question regarding that. That sometimes I have some intuition of a thing happening in a particular way, which is going very negative. And suddenly it starts happening the way I have just imagined or thought of. So is it a self-hypnosis situation, or I should follow that feeling within me? What it is? Can you please analyze?
Okay, actually your initial part of sentence got cut, but what I understand is that you sometimes get some negative indications in your mind about
No, I'll correct myself if something, things happen positive and negatively in a life. So if some challenges come and I think on it, I suddenly get some sort of a path or something like that. But normally I don't follow it. And then suddenly after some days or some months, it suddenly occurs that, oh, I am on the same track. So what it is a self-hypnosis or positively driving through a thing, or it is really in something which a message is coming. Please analyze.
No, okay. Again, I will repeat what I understand is that you get some inner instructions, and then you do not follow them, but after some time you find yourself following it. Okay,
Correct.
okay.
Things happen
Okay.
around me that suddenly it get connected that, oh, 3-4 months back it happened like that.
Yes, well, it's a subject of individual research, but from top of the mind, what I can think that it means that inner calling came, but since our conscious mind or brain did not act upon it, so it went through in the subconscious, and over a period of time, if, as we discussed, if it is intuition, it will be stronger, it will grow stronger and stronger over a period of time. And so from that subconscious level, it keeps affecting our actions and daily life, and that suddenly we may find ourselves to be doing the same thing what we thought earlier. I think so.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Shikhar. There are a number of comments still, but we now lack the time. So we'll be asking, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we close, Shikhar?
No. I just want to thank everyone, and thank you for have a patient hearing, and thank you, Brother Vicente and Brother Charlie Romero, for having this great effort, by the way, that people so far and distant can still meet and discuss things, and keeping the spiritual intuitions alive in everyone.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, would you like to say something before we close?
Thank you very much, Brother Shikhar, for that substantial presentation. And we also extend our appreciation to the participants who have fielded their comments as well as questions, which equally enriches this discussion and our search for that homing signal within. By way of footnote, when Shikhar and I were discussing what topic to present, he mentioned that this was of 2 parts. And as mentioned, there is that part of how to access that homing signal. Although we have a full lineup of presenters this August, hopefully in the immediate future or maybe in September, we can have that presentation so that we can have a complete presentation of this topic. So again, thank you very much to Shikhar and to our friends who have joined us again this afternoon to start off our presenters for August. So thank you everyone and take care.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, we'll now close our session. And if anybody among you would like to say something before we close, just unmute yourself to greet other people or whatever.